it. So it's recording. Let me go ahead and share this. Can you see that, Dr. Revis?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Revis, it's 7 o'clock. Let's get started.
Let's go. Well, welcome to week 5. And I know that you are excited to be here in week 5. And first thing I want to do is just a couple comments about task 3. It was a lot of writing for you to do, and many of you did just an outstanding job on both the literature review and the annotated bibliography. Some of you had a few APA issues that you need to fix, and at this point, I just say you have APA issues. I don't necessarily tell you what they are. And I know that if you're getting really quality peer reviews, that those your peers are pointing out specifics, so that's good. Make sure that if I ask you to revise something in the comment box, that before you turn that back in on Thursday evening, that you go down through and make sure that you've addressed everything that I have asked you to do. For most of you, it's never very much, but just make sure, because you just get that, you just get 2 attempts, and then you have to move on to the final submission. But overall, I felt that you guys had grasped the task well, and that you had done a good job leading your PLC through looking at all the different programs and coming up with a recommendation. So congratulations. Those peer reviews that I looked at this morning that were already in, again, very good, strong, formative, and that's how you help each other grow. It's when you give that thorough and formative feedback. So kudos to that as well.
And Dr. Revis, I say the same thing. The peer reviews overall have been some of the best I've ever had. And I like the way that you are detailing specifics in there, some things that I'm not even catching or Dr. Revis is not even catching. You're catching them, and that is great that you're doing that. Not only is it helping your peers, you are learning and growing from this as well, and it allows you to go back and to refine and edit your work better. So great job on the peer reviews. Don't, just because we're saying that, don't back down. Okay, I know it gets harder towards the end of evidence, because you're more refined in what you do, but still be as detailed as possible so that you can learn and they can learn from it. As far as task 3, Dr. Revis, I'm just going to open it up real fast before we move on. Is there any student, based on the feedback that Dr. Revis and I have given you for task 5, is there anyone that needs us to say anything at all about task 3 before we move on? Do you know, based on what we've told you to do, what you've got to do and get this edited no later than Thursday of this week? Does everybody know what to do? I do want to say one thing. Make sure in prompt 2 that you are putting the chart in there with your 3 online programs. Make sure that you do not miss the opportunity to do the comparison of those 3 in there, and make sure that, notice that the directions say that you are putting multiple visuals in there. That means that we need to see not just 1 or 2 things, we need to see multiple things, and you are citing them as figures. And make sure that when you put a figure in there, that we don't want detailed information, but we need to know what we're looking at. We need to know what it represents. So if your brief little title is not enough, then you go underneath it and you give just a one sentence explanation of what that is if we need to know more information. And when you do your appendices, don't just put it in there, say Appendix A, and don't tell us what it is. We need to know what this represents. So make sure you're following APA with that. Dr. Revis, APA is something, all we can do is say your APA is not correct. You have to learn it and you have to fix that. We've given you great examples. We've given you a completed AAPSL example. We've given you the helpful hints document that's got the work in there. If you're not using those, then you're hurting your own self. And once your peers put work in there under discussion, you're not copying their work by looking at it and modeling after something that has already been approved. Or if you don't quite understand something, go back and look at it. And if yours looks differently from what we have provided in the example, that means it's wrong. So, that's a simple test right there. So let's do that. Dr. Revis, let's skip down for just a second to reminders about the AAPSL Research and Development Zoom assignment.
Okay, so last week I went over your first Zoom team assignment. You have determined who is going to be your Zoom master, and the Zoom master is responsible for putting together an agenda for the Zoom meeting. And those meetings that go the best are those that have a schedule, an agenda that you're going to follow, have somebody keeping time. Again, I spent a lot of time about, as the facilitator, the Zoom master, the facilitator, you have to make sure you keep that meeting moving, that you do not allow one person to dominate over everybody else. We talked about that. We talked about some dialogue starters. You may not choose to answer all of those things, but remember, what we're looking for is for you to talk about your leadership and how you feel like that you have grown in your leadership through the data dive or through the PLC, convening the PLC and task 1, and even through task 3. Now, the dialogue says you doesn't have any specific prompts for you to look at task 3, but you can also go ahead and make comments about task 3 as well. And once the Zoom master is recording, once they upload it to YouTube and it processes, then they are responsible for sending the link out to everybody in the Zoom team. And you have to turn that Zoom link in with your reflection. Now, we're not, if there are 4 of you in a Zoom team, we're not going to look at all 4, but you have to turn that in order for you to get a grade for that. So any questions about your first Zoom assignment?
Dr. Revis, I want to let my class know that and I want to thank Dr. Revis for taking the class last week. And class, thank you for allowing me to be in Texas at my conference last week. And I graduated from a program I had been working on for the last year. So thank you so much. During the time you were having class, I was actually graduating from that program. So thank you so much. But Dr. Revis did a PowerPoint on the dialogue starters. I placed it in my course shell. You can find it under the assignment itself. Then you can also find it under session 4, where your agenda was for last week. And I went ahead and placed it in the AAPSL help, where the documents are in there. I put it in there as well. So there's several places where you can find that PowerPoint. So I just want to make sure that you knew it was there. And I also sent out an announcement about that. So like Dr. Revis said, is everybody clear on what that assignment should look like? And we should see that no later than 6 o'clock by Sunday of this week, completed. Okay. Let's look at the rest of the agenda, and then I'm going to phase out of this. We're going to go ahead and introduce task 4, and we're going to take a glance at task 5. Also down here, remember, and Dr. Revis is going to lead off on a discussion of task stream, your competency folio, and your internship, and we'll conclude with that. But look at this. These are the week 4 responsibilities that you should already have done. This is what week 5 should look like. And then go ahead and get a glance of what next week is going to look like. You should always have an understanding of where this is following. Guys, do you realize after next week, you will have finished all the work for evidence 1, and we will begin telling you how to put it together, and you will make your first major submission into task stream for a grade without outside evaluator. But it's not going to go there until Dr. Revis and I tells you it's ready to go there, because we're all striving for accomplished 4. That's what we're striving for. Okay. So don't do anything until we tell you that it's ready to go. Okay. So I'm going to minimize this, come out of this, and then I want to pull up I want to start with the helpful hints document as a starter, and then we'll come back to something else. Now, I have deliberately started the helpful hints at the end of task 2, because I want us to lead up to why we are at task 4 today. You know, you formed your PLC, you did all that research, blah, blah, blah. You've done all that. You've did your data dives or whatever. But the main thing, this is where we're starting. At the end of task 2, you decided what that most pressing need was. And that's where your journey began with this. This is where your challenge is now, and this is what you're going to attack. And then you went into task 3 this past week. That's what you're finishing up with now. And remember, with task 3, once you identified that most pressing need, remember you were to do a literature review, and that literature review was focused specifically on that most pressing need. You know, what does the research say about this? You know, it's not what I think, what Salita thinks, what Kayla thinks, what Dr. Revis thinks. It's what the research says. And you were beginning to look for research and best practices that would help you better understand the identified need, so that you could begin working towards finding solutions and answers to help attack that problem. So that's what your literature review was, and that's what your annotated bibliography was. Your annotated bibliography was also further developing ways to generate resources to help attack the problem. In other words, it's like Dr. Revis is like going to the doctor. And the doctor diagnoses, he's identified the problem. This is your sickness. So the doctor and the team gets together, and they begin looking at ways to try to deal with that sickness. They're not going to just say, this is what you got, and this is what we're going to do, without giving some thought and and looking for the best things that they can do to help heal whatever that sickness is. So that's what you're doing. You're looking for ways to deal with the problem that you've identified in your school. So that's what you did. And then remember the 3 online resources, the digital tools, were programs that if your school decided to use these programs would help you to try to solve that problem that you've identified. So you're putting your strategy together of how you're going to attack the problem. Okay, that identified problem. And then that brings us to task 4. Now, this is where you've got to take everything that you've done, all the research you've done in task 1, 2, and 3, all the work you've done, all the collaboration you've done on that identified problem. Remember, your focus has to stay always now on that identified problem, that most pressing need at your school. So this is what you're going to do. And Dr. Revis is going to help me with this in a minute when my voice gives out. Make sure you read the description and instructions carefully. Prompt 1 of task 4 is the development of your action plan for your identified problem. Now, this is what you're going to do. You're going to first explain your action plan in narrative form. There are 7 headings that must be individually addressed relative to your identified problem for the action plan. Your heading is, this is your first heading, the importance of the action plan, research-based. What does the research have to say about the importance of an action plan? We're not looking for your opinion. Again, it's what does the research say? Now, I want you to notice this is an example. The importance of the action plan, research-based. An action plan is action plans in education focus, blah, blah, blah. Notice this is research according to Seeski 2015. So you're doing valid research in there. And notice here, this is from one of your text readings, one of your textbooks. Ubben et al. 2007 explains that action planning contains several elements, including activities, and it goes on to talk about that. This is where Dr. Revis and I can zero in on whether you are doing your text readings as well. We need to see evidences of that in the research and the narrative work that you're doing. So first of all, you're going to talk about the purpose of an action plan and specifically zero in your action plan. What does the research say? Go ahead.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. How many resources would we like to have?
Well, I would say I don't want to say just 3 because you may need more than 3, but I would say you would need at least 3.
Okay.
I would say for something like this, Dr. Revis, to make sure that you've got good, solid information, I would, if it were me, I would have no less than 5 in there because that gives you some good, solid research. Don't you think that's a good basis?
Yeah, I would say at least 3. I think
3.
the example only has 2,
Right.
but I think you need at least 3 references.
Right. And I'm always one that I'm going to have a little bit more because I don't know what that evaluator is going to be looking at, and I don't want to give them room for doubt. So, and then the next one is this is your next heading, alignment with student learning outcomes. Remember, it's about the student and it's about making growth. You've identified this is a weakness in my school. So we want to make things better. So when we implement this action plan, or when we propose the implementation of this action plan, what will the outcomes for the students be, and how is it going to be aligned with the state objectives? Everything that's outlined for what you have to do in literacy, math, science, whatever it is that you're working for. Your action plan must align completely with student learning outcomes as measured by test scores and summative assessments. You are to narratively explain that alignment in this section. And this gives you just a great example of something to follow. Remember, you're using APA style in there. Always focus on your APA. Notice they've talked about one of their the online resource that they have selected was Dreambox. So they have included in that narrative, talking about the different ones. Peer Deck is in there as well, and Dreambox, but they're talking about those resources in there. That's okay. Dr. Revis, would you talk about the next one, please?
In your action plan, you have a column where you designate if a specific goal or objective is short term, midterm, or long term. Now, here we are. Some of you are coming up on midterm of your first 9 weeks. And so you might want to think about what kinds of things do we want to get accomplished, by our Christmas break, which, that's probably short term. Midterm would be sometime the following semester. Long-term goals, I would suspect, would be something that you would plan for to start the next school year. Nobody's going to set you those time frames, but there are some things that you want to do immediately, some things that'll be down the road, and some things that may be further down the road. But you have to describe those narratively and
Dr.
be
Revis,
very specific.
the long-term goals could be at the end of the year when you have end of grade and then, of course, testing. So that is something that you can think about as well.
Right. And so here's the example. And as you can see, what your evaluators are going to look at is that you have put in a great description of your goals and objectives. You have also designated which ones are going to be the short term, midterm, and long term.
And again, the great examples are in there. And again, this is not as detailed. We just put something in there to give you a starter. This is not at all what we think it needs to exactly look like. Yours could be more comprehensive than that based on, what you're looking at. Then the next heading is specific activities aligned with the designated goals and objectives. You must identify all aligned activities that will be used to meet your short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals and objectives for your action plan. So what are those, Dr. Stebbin, Dr. Revis? Those are the things, these are the things that you're going to do. The practices, the programs that you're going to do, and you're going to be specific. Number one, this is what we're going to do. The goals and objectives for that must be in there. Then you're going to decide, okay, is this short term? Is it midterm? Or is it long term? As you go down, and we'll show you the template in just a minute of what you've got to follow. But for every activity that you put in there, you've got to decide it must relate to that most pressing need. First of all, it can't just be something random. It must relate to that most pressing need, and you've got to fill in the blanks in that template with everything following that, and we'll show you that in a minute. But Dr. Revis, I would think that a minimum of 5 specific activities to address this need. Wouldn't you think so?
I agree. And don't forget that anytime you're implementing a new program, or if you're implementing a program with fidelity that you've had in your school and you've just piddled with it, you're going to need professional development. That is an activity. Okay, so I would expect to see professional development as an activity for everybody.
Right. And you'll learn this later on. But Dr. Revis, if they want to go find something about professional development as it relates to, I mean, you'll look at your topic, but who is somebody out there that is considered the mother of staff development?
That would be Linda Darling Hammond,
Right,
and we'll talk more about her in our next evidence artifact work.
right. But that's somebody that you can look at, you know, as you're looking at this. She may have some good suggestions for you out there. But again, a minimum of 5, and as Dr. Revis said, one of them must. We're really going to look for some staff development in there. Now, staff development can take on a lot of meanings. It can be during your staff development can be a whole school staff development. It can be implemented during your your POCs. You know, it could be, you know, with you could talk, you could organize this with the whoever the math coach is, if it's math, if or with the literacy coach, if it's literacy. These are things you can collaborate with them about. Okay. Okay, Dr. Revis, if you'll take this one.
Okay, the next heading has to be or will be indicators of success and measurement techniques. So, again, this is about monitoring. How do you know you have successfully reached those midterm, uh, short-term, midterm, and long-term goals and objectives? And what measurement techniques have you put into place to make this determination? So, for every strategy, you have to have an indicator of success with measurable techniques.
Now, remember
And then
too,
here's
go ahead, Dr. Evans, let me tell them that. Remember too,
that's okay. Go ahead.
when you're doing this, remember, and we'll talk about this later on in something else you've got to do. Remember, you're not only measuring student success, but you've got teachers that are implementing this. So you are also monitoring teacher success as well in this. Okay? So there is a twofold thing. You're looking at teachers and students in this, because if the teachers aren't doing something with fidelity, then the students aren't going to learn it. Okay, so think about that in your measurement techniques. I'm sorry, Dr. Revis.
No, that's fine. And then here's an example describing narratively how you could put this together. Notice in that second sentence there, at least 65%. We want to see some specific measurable targets in here.
Okay, and make sure that they are reasonable targets, but don't put them too low either. Don't put them too high, don't put them too low. Okay. And your heading is clarification of roles and responsibilities. Okay, who has been assigned to do what? Somebody's got to see that it's done. And what have they been assigned to do? You are to name the people. If it's you, then you identify you as the candidate and the PLC leader. If it's your curriculum coach, if it's your math coach, if it's your principal, if it's your assistant principal, if it's teachers, that you've got to who has been assigned to do what are they going to do, and who's going to do it. Okay. And then it goes on in there and talks about in this clarification of roles and responsibilities. You narratively talk about all of that there. Okay, Dr. Revis.
All right, everybody, ears perked up. Here's where everybody messes up, or a frequent place where people mess up, I should say. Formative and summative assessment criteria. We always think about formative assessment as being on the spot assessment for our students. For this work, formative assessment means how do you assess the adults are doing what they need to be doing? I want to say that again. Formative assessment equals monitoring the adults. It's very different from the way we typically talk about formative assessment. Summative assessment is about students. It could be about adults as well, but it's typically more about students. So make sure that you identify in your plan and put it in there in your narrative. How are you going to determine the adults are implementing the plan with fidelity? And there are lots of ways you can do that, and we'll talk about them later when we show you the example. But stuff like you're going to do walkthroughs, and that a short-term goal may be that 65% of your teachers are implementing the online program with fidelity. A long-term goal may be that 95% are, so on and so forth. So that would be formative, and then you have to do summative.
Okay. Now, once each of the 7 topics have been narratively addressed, you're going to take that same information and you're going to put it into a graphic organizer. You must use the one that has been provided in the template. There is no choice. And here it is. You will use this same action plan. Again, it will become a figure. You'll name it for whatever yours is. But notice that what's in the headings up here. You don't rearrange them. You keep it just, these are the specific activities. And this is where we said you have to have a minimum of 5, and one of them must be something to do with staff development. Once you identify that specific activity, when is it going to be done? It says this one is direct and small group instruction 3 times a week. The persons responsible are going to be the 8th grade math teachers. What is going to be needed? Face-to-face instruction with daily lessons through Open Up Workbook, and it goes on to talk about the other things. The formative assessment, this is where you're going to, the principal, the curriculum coach, whoever, assistant principal, how are you going to monitor whether the adults are doing what they're supposed to do? Weekly lesson plan checks per topic. That's one way. The summative assessment method is with the students. Unit assessments on Master Connect. This is where they can get a score from. They can see something valid to see whether they have successfully mastered it or not. Then this is going to be a short-term goal. Students will achieve 65% mastery on formative and summative assessments. And students, you can look at formative assessments here when you're looking at student success. But for this purpose, this is talking about teachers only right here. But you can look at it when you're looking at your goal, okay? And then the indicator of success is going to be increased progress on 8th grade standards in math starting, and this was back in November 2021, whenever that is. Dr. Revis, would you like to pick up and elaborate some more on that?
I always think it's easier in your POC to fill out this organizer with them. Ensure that you explain in detail, what you got to have in each of those columns. And you can do your narrative work from this graphic organizer.
Right.
But that would be my suggestion. Again, you cannot deviate from this. It has to be in this format.
Okay. And remember, Every space, don't leave anything out or don't say non-applicable. Everything must get completed. Now, I'm going to tell you, we're going to look at it closely, but I will tell you, your outside evaluator, this will be closely monitored. Am I right, Dr. Revis?
Right. This is your culminating activity, so to speak, for everything you've been doing. And number one, you got to make sure it aligns. Whatever you said you were going to do and move forward with in task 3, it's got to align to what you're presenting here in your action plan. So they're going to look for alignment, and they're going to look very closely at your action plan. Culminating activity, you could even call this a mini school improvement plan.
It really is.
Yes,
and then,
it
and
is.
remember, this has 2 prompts. Now we're going to prompt 2. Now you're going to share all that with the principal, but not yet, or the leadership team. Now, if your principal's on your team, on your PLC, which that is so advisable, then you want to invite other people in leadership to be a part of this presentation. Okay? But at least your principal has to be present. Okay? There's no options to that. You are to share your action plan with the principal leadership team to discuss possible implementation. And if your principal's on the team, or you've got administration on your team, then it should be something that they would want you to be able to begin implementation with almost immediately, so that you can see the results of it by the end of the school year, in time for for your state testing. There must be clear evidence of the meeting. If not a video, there could be a picture of your presenting. You will need an agenda and a sign-in sheet for those present with their titles. And we did put it in there. But when you present, it's highly recommended that you do some type of a media presentation. PowerPoint is the easiest that people fall to, but sometimes people do other things if you're more tech savvy and but it must be a presentation, and you will provide proof of that presentation with the slides or the document that will be embedded in the work that you submit for Dr. Revis and me to look at, and then for the evaluators to see as well. Now, notice they start out with a narrative. Due to differences in the grade level schedules and teacher absences, I was unable to schedule a meeting among myself, principal, and PLC. Therefore, met prior to my meeting with our principal and went through the presentation. But they've got evidence that they were, that they presented. You just talk about this is where you talk about your presentation. Okay. If you've got any figures in there, where you've communicated with your principal, this is where you can include that information as well. There's actual evidence of the action plan and resource presentation. This really needs to be more visible. This is make sure that if you do this, that you make your slides where we can see actually what those slides are. Don't just insert a link to click on. Show the slides themselves, because evaluators will not take the time to click on that link many times, but we need to show that it's done. Now, in the process of that presentation, this is what else you've got to do in prompt 2 down here. That all of that presentation is guided by this, and you're going to provide this work to guide you in that presentation. This is what it's going to be. You're going to have a heading called Building Efficacy. In narrative form, what does the research say about building efficacy amongst the teaching staff for improving student achievement. And I'm going to pick on Salita because I see her right now. Let's say Salita teaches a 5th grade class. Salita don't like her job. She hates to come to school every day, and she just don't feel good about herself. Her home life's bad. Um, uh, just everything's going south. So she comes in and she goes through the routine of teaching. Do you think those students recognize that Salita's not happy about her job? Salita, do you think they would recognize that?
I didn't know I was me. I mean, yeah, they probably know if you're the
Would
teacher.
notice it? Do you think that would have an impact if you weren't happy about what you did on your students?
Oh, absolutely.
That it
You're not-
would, wouldn't it? So if a teacher's not happy, if they don't like what they're doing, it will directly impact the students in that classroom. They will not do the best that they can do. So this is what you're going to talk about. Building efficacy, how a teacher feels about their teaching ability amongst the teaching staff. What does the research say about how that impacts student achievement? Now, you're going to, and we'll talk about this later on too, but if you go back to, he's an old, he started this a long time ago, but Albert Bandura, Bandura, is the seminal researcher for this. He's known as the father of efficacy. So if you begin there, he's going to give you some good things about when he started this concept, and then he's going to give you lots of other good researchers. There's names in there that you'll find after that have built upon his efficacy premises that he started long ago. So you're going to talk about that, and when you do your presentation, so you're the professional now, you're the expert. You're going to lead into this, about the teaching staff and, how much they influence student achievement in your school. You're going to look so smart in front of that principal and those people. They're going to want to hire you for something else right then, to be the next assistant principal for them. So, make it sound good. This is your time to shine, to stand out. Um, and again, this is what the research says. And again, I would have a minimum of 3 references there, a minimum. You can have more. Dr. Revis, would you like to pick up on the next one?
Sure. And here is this heading is about strategies for sustained growth. Again, this is about research. One new program, or, well, in your case, it's going to be an online program. How do you keep the momentum going? How do you keep teachers engaged and involved and feeling like this is worthwhile, because this is more work for them? So, again, look at some strategies and some research about how you sustain that growth over time. And it will have a lot to do with it goes back and has a lot to do with teacher efficacy, actually. When teachers feel like they're making a positive impact on students, they will work more and they will work harder because they know they can make a difference. So what kind of strategies are you going to throw in there to make sure that people stay engaged and your students stay engaged and motivated?
Right. Remember, you're the role of a principal now. Remember, you got your teacher hat on now. You have got to be the biggest cheerleader for teaching and for the programs that you implement And if you're not excited about it as the leader, guess what? Your teachers are not going to be excited about it either. So how are you going to keep the momentum going? Look for opportunities for small celebrations along the way, and then look for opportunities for big celebrations when you can do that as well. It doesn't take a lot sometimes to just a word of encouragement. Kayla, I really like the way you are doing so and so in the classroom. I went by your classroom the other day, and guess what? Kayla's going to work harder than she's ever worked before because her principal paid attention to that. So, your heading is issues concerning diversity. Now, when you look at diversity takes on a lot of meanings, and it's different for different schools because uh, our all of our schools are different. So you've got to look at your school and say, what are those issues out there based on diversity? And when we say diversity, it's not necessarily, we're not looking at skin color, we're not necessarily we're looking at, what is the makeup of our school, and what are those issues out there that could possibly hinder student achievement. Now, it could be, you have to be specific. It could be uh, a racial thing. We've got to be real about it. It could be that. It could be migrants coming to the other. It could be that, with everything that's happening in America today, and people coming from across the border here, non-English speaking, and your area happens to be one of the areas that is highly flooded with this. That could be a diverse issue that is bringing down the test scores in your school. You've got to be real about what is it. It could be you could have your school could have a high exceptional children's population. It could be a plethora of things. You got to think about what are those issues specific to my school that possibly are impacting student achievement. And you've got to be, when you do your presentation, you've got to be able to support what you're saying, to this team, to your leadership in your team. And again, if your principal or administration's on there, they're going to give you some good suggestions for this as well when you meet with your PLC. And you just simply talk about it. Dr. Revis, the next section.
Okay, so the next section is just about resources, and that would be human capital needed, or it could be, anything, any fiscal resources that you may need. It may mean that you are going to take funds, you recommend taking funds that you have used in the past for this particular program and switch it over and use and purchase this program. But don't forget that it's not only just the online resource, but it could also be, are there other resources in human capital that we need as well? Now, you got to stay real here, of course. So, you would, all of us would like to purchase the program that has the most bells and whistles, but that may not be real. And a lot of you, I saw that even in your task 3, when you talked about, but we know the funds are not available for this particular program. Therefore, we defaulted to this particular program. So you're just going to talk about resources there that you need.
Right. And this is where also a source that you really believe in, an online resource that you really believe in, maybe that's something that would become a long-term goal, and maybe you could start working with your your PTA and other funding so that if you can't get it this year, that is something that you can begin looking at, maybe funding for another year. But still, you may even have two programs in there, one that you want to work with now because you can't afford it, but one that you would like to work towards getting as a long-term goal as well because you really believe in that program. And then your heading is establishing a shared vision of learning. What are the plans for getting everybody on board and moving in the same direction? Remember, you're the principal, you're the leader. How are you going to move from point A to point B? How are you going to keep teachers motivated? This is almost like the summary of everything that you've done. Okay, this is what we're proposing. Now, how am I going to establish that shared vision of learning? What am I going to do to lead the children out of Egypt into the promised land? I like that analogy, Dr. Revis. You got to lead them into the promised land.
And can I get on my little sermonette box here?
Go ahead.
Guys, this
You're cutting out, Dr.
establishing
Revis.
pardon me?
You were cutting out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said this is at the heart of leadership. It's great to come up with all these plans and all these measurable outcomes and these measurable goals, but how are you going to sell it and to motivate your staff to doing what you want them to do? You know, John Maxwell, he's done a lot of leadership work. He says leadership is about influencing people to do things they ordinarily wouldn't do on their own. Now, a lot of people don't like that word because it's what do you mean, manipulate? Well, I guess it's maybe not as a strong a word as manipulation, but we are influencing others. We want everybody on board with what we believe will make a difference for children. You have to be the biggest cheerleader and you have to be the biggest salesperson. And I know none of us like to do that. You do that every day in the classroom, though, and you know that. So you have to do this with your staff, with your parents, with your community, and with your students. We know this will make a difference. And that's just what is leadership. That's the hard part of leadership.
Right.
Thank you for obliging.
That was good. That was good preaching. And then remember your reference section. And again, some are still having issues with APA. Everything is double spaced. Don't put any more single spacing in there for references. It's double spaced. You double space before heading, you double space after a heading. And just make sure that you're following APA. We've given you good examples to follow. Go back and look at other students' work and see that. And then your appendices. Remember, at a minimum, you should always have meeting agendas, minutes of the meeting, a picture of you presenting. And with this one, remember, you're going to have in there embedded your presentation as well. I would make sure that now, Dr. Revis, if your principal's on your team, then they're going to be there when you meet with your PLC this week and you get all this done. This is a lot of work this week. They're going to be there with you. If they're not there and they're not on your team, I would encourage them, you know, to when you finish up with this, when you meet with your team, I would encourage them to be there, and you could kill two birds with one stone if your principal is in that meeting with you there. Okay? You've got to show evidence of presenting this, working with your PLC, and you've got to show evidence of presenting to your administration. Now, Dr. Stebbin, with all this, Dr. Revis, what if I can't get my meeting scheduled before the week's over with my administration? Okay, we're going to give you a way out of this. You must submit all of this work to us by Sunday at 6 o'clock. But if you cannot meet with your principal until that Monday, schedule it that Monday afternoon, next Monday afternoon, then you put a disclaimer in there for Dr. Revis and us. You put a holder in there, a holder space, and you highlight it. Say disclaimer. I have a meeting scheduled with my administration team, and you tell us when. And then when you submit it back to us for that last review, then we will give you credit for that presentation. We cannot pass this on until you have evidence of that presentation. So does everybody understand that? You will have time. If you cannot get to your presentation this week, you will have time, to do that on Monday. Dr. Revis, I'm not going to go to task 5. It's too much for them. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop share.
This is a big task, guys. You've got to do research in several sections. And then you've got to, again, my suggestion is to start out with your graphic organizer in your PLC meeting, and make sure that you know exactly what is needed in each column. For example, when they see the column formative assessments, you're going to have to explain to them what that means for the purposes of this work. So I would suggest using that template to gather all of the details and the meat of the work. And, think of it like a graphic organizer. When we have our students write in class, we always tell them to write from a graphic organizer, right? That's what you're doing. But you're getting your team and facilitating your team in designing that organizer, and then you're doing the writing. So it's a lot of, facilitating, coming to consensus on things, and then doing a lot of narrative work, and then the presentation. So a lot of work. Kayla?
Our due date for our draft for task 5 is this Thursday. So can you go over it so we know what we're doing?
I don't know what you're asking.
Yeah, say that one more time.
Like you said, you're not going to go through task 5, but
You're
the
not going
draft
to.
task 5 is due.
Task 5 is not due this week.
Thursday.
No, it's not due this week.
It's due Thursday.
Dr. Revis, Dr. Stedman,
Yes.
what she's saying is if you go to the calendar on September the 26th for Thursday, it shows that task 5 is due.
Okay, disregard that. It's not due. Don't worry about task 5 with anything. Nobody worry about task 5. Okay.
I was like, in the calendar.
No task 5. Don't even look at task 5 yet.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
We have to worry about task 4.
Okay, that's an oversight. We'll fix that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question, Dr. Revis, Dr. Stedman.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there any way to break down task 4 1 and then give us time to do prompt 2?
No,
because there's so much research and so much that has to be done.
I think by allowing you to hold over that presentation, I think that's all the breakdown that we're going to give you.
And the reason
you can do it.
The reason being, because of what we know is ahead of you, 1 week behind will get everything behind, and we can't do that.
Okay, thank you. I do understand that.
Okay,
but it was worth a shot.
You'll get it, Kim. I promise you, you'll get it.
Yeah, it's doable. It may not be doable to have the presentation, and that's why we give you a little leeway on it, but it is doable. You're going to be writing a lot after you have your meeting, a lot. But I would go ahead and start my research sections now. I
Okay.
think Erica you have your name up, hand up.
Yes, just a quick question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
On the, and I made a note. It just slipped my mind for a second. Give me a second. Let me regroup.
Okay. All right, we'll move
Okay.
on to Julia and come back.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I had a quick question. I know that you said the formative assessment was more for the teachers, but if we're using some type of formative assessment with students, we can also still call that a formative assessment, correct?
Your focus on the formative assessment, Julia, is to make sure that what teachers are doing is with fidelity. It's a fidelity check. Now, when you look at the summative for students, don't even go there. Just don't even go there. Only focus on what you're doing to make sure teachers are implementing the programs or what you're suggesting with fidelity, and only look at summative for student achievement. If you do, it's going to get confusing.
Okay, so when I write something, like I've already written part of it, and like I did an assessment with students in their guided groups, I would call that a formative assessment in my classroom, but for the purpose of the paper, I should call it summative.
A short-term summative.
Okay.
Short-term summative.
Short, yeah.
Okay.
Let's keep it at that. Yeah.
And we're only having to do this because we know what the evaluators look for. And we have to play that game because you're creating a lot of work here. And, you know, they're sticklers on some of this stuff.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood because, like I said, I would call it a
Yes.
formative, like a CFA in my classroom, but so I'll go
Yeah.
back and change that.
We
Erica, have you got your
and we understand what you're talking about, Julia, but just work with us, okay?
Erica, have you got your thoughts together?
I got
yet?
it. I got it.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that. I was making so many notes. I spoke briefly with my principal today and shared some ideas because I was kind of making some notes about what we had talked about in the last PLC, and we were talking about some of the district requirements, and the district requirement for our math 1 is IXL, and he said that the district was going to want to stick with that and we weren't going to be able to change it. So is that something that I can keep in my action plan, but also implement the new strategy that we selected in the PLC?
Well, have you been implementing that with fidelity?
Not all of the teachers use it now.
Okay. The workaround is if you clearly say in task 3 that this is the district chosen or mandated program. However, not all teachers are implementing with fidelity. Work on strategies to make sure it is implemented across the board by all teachers with fidelity. You got to say that, okay?
Okay.
And then your activities, of course, you're going to need professional development. Using it is probably because they are not comfortable with it.
Okay.
So you need some professional development. It can be differentiated professional development, but you know, make sure that you say that clearly. Or do you agree with that, Dr. Stedman?
Because I think
Yes.
the issue is the district has mandated it not in the math classroom, but they've mandated it during remediation time for 9th and 10th graders throughout the district, and not necessarily in the math classroom. So we were he's looking to mandate it in the math classroom along with the strategies that we've suggested.
There you go. Okay. So you've got a different twist on it.
Right.
Okay.
But
Make it
it wasn't
clear.
one of my original strategies anyway, because the school was already using it. But he's
Right.
saying that he wants us to use that one as well.
Well, you know what? He's the boss, right?
Right.
Yeah. So,
And Erica and,
you
and
know,
all the
yeah,
others,
and I could see
make
how
sure,
that's a little bit different focus.
yeah, and make sure that if these are the cases, you narratively say this in your work. You just say,
Okay.
you say what you just said. Make sure that when when the evaluator sees it, that and when Dr. Revis and I look at it, you know, that whatever the principal says, you know, this is it, but this is what the principal has advised that we have to do. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Heather.
Hey, so I want to make sure when we're doing the presentation for prompt 2 for our admin team, all of the headings in prompt 2, that's included in the presentation along with the action plan, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes. And
Okay.
right, Dr. Revis. Well, those
Some of
are
them
guys,
won't.
those are talking points. So
Yeah.
you
Okay.
don't have to go through all of that. You use now we need to see it. It's going to be
Right.
what you submit to us. But when you're talking about it, you don't need to be reading to them. You need to be talking
Right.
about teacher efficacy. You need to be talking about those things and let
Okay.
that be part of your dialogue with them as you are presenting the plan.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question, Heather.
You're welcome. That is a good question. Dr. Revis,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's just remind them about their internship hours and let's hold off on that other until next week.
I agree. I agree. And we promise we've been putting off competency folio.
But you're going to be okay.
We promise next week. Yeah, you're gonna be okay. But we promise next week we'll get into it.
We'll start out with that next week, Dr. Revis.
Okay. But you're gonna be fine. Task 5 and competency folio are closely related brothers. So,
and I think if we give it to you tonight, I think it will be way overload, and we don't want to do that. You've got enough to deal with this week without having to think about something else.
now,
we
guys,
got
you're probably thinking you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, it just gets worse and worse. Promise you can do this. If you've gotten this far, task 4 is a lot. But once you get over this hurdle, you're going to see it kind of level off a little bit. Okay. But we promise you can get this done this week.
Right. And then when you get to your next evidence, your task 3 in the AAPSL is going to be the task 4 for the AAPSL. So you're going to do it again. But guess what? Once you go through it this time, the others from here on out, because you're going to do one with every evidence that you do, there's going to be a plan of action. Once we get you through this one, the others will be much easier to do because you will have already learned the process. Okay? You're going to do it. We know you are.
Casey, do you have a question?
I do have a quick question. I know y'all said we're bumping task 5 to next week, and it's not due Thursday. But if it's not due Thursday, when is the draft going to be due?
It won't be this Sunday. It'll be next Sunday.
Next Sunday, got it.
Yeah,
I just wanted to change my calendar.
Yeah, we've got some leeway with that one. With the last task, we got a little bit of leeway. But right now, don't even focus on that task 5, guys. We want you to really do a knockout job on task 4. So don't even concentrate on task 5 yet.
Any other questions before we call it quits for tonight?
Guys, thank y'all so much. Those of you that have stuck with us and you have not quit, we thank you. Your work is improving every week. We just see, Dr. Evans and I talk, and we really see growth already in you. Thank you so much.
Rico, you've got a question. If you're okay, you can sign off. And Rico, I see you've got your hand raised. So
Um, I just want to can you tell me one more time what was the name of the gentleman you said look up for efficacy?
Okay, his name is Albert Bandura, Bandura.
B U what?
Bandura.
And his first name is Albert.
Albert,
Thank you.
you got it. Okay, Chelsea?
I just had a question about where we have to post to YouTube the link for our Zoom. Did you say there's a reflection with that also, or it's just the link?
There's a reflection. Go to the assignment and click on that, and it'll tell you what you got to do with the reflection.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. You will include two things when you attach your assignment: the link that your Zoom team leader provides there, or if you're the leader, the link for your team, and then you will put your reflection in there too. You'll have two attachments in there for an assignment.
Okay.
Salita?
On for a minute after Dr. Stedman.
Sure. Okay, everybody good? Okay.
right.
We'll see you next week. Let me stop recording. Pause it.